The crowd roared like thunder. MVP. MVP. MVP.
Jaylen Cross stood at center court, arms raised, sweat dripping, eyes scanning the sea of flashing lights. He had just dropped 42 points in Game 7 of the finals.
He was 23. Rich. Famous. Loved. A walking legend. The face of the league. The king of the city.
But that moment, bright and blinding, was the calm before a storm that would tear everything apart.
Flash forward. Orange jumpsuit. Shackles. Cold courtroom lights. The same hands that once held championship trophies were now trembling in cuffs.
His eyes were hollow. His name, once chanted by millions, was now spit out like venom by reporters. Ex-NBA star Jaylen Cross pleads guilty in racketeering case.
But how did he get here? Jaylen was born in the trenches of Newark, New Jersey. No father.
Just a mother who worked 2 jobs and prayed he wouldn't get pulled into the streets. The neighborhood was a war zone: sirens, crackheads, and corner hustlers. But Jaylen had 2 weapons: his hunger to escape and a basketball. At 9, he was already outplaying kids twice his age. At 12, he was the street legend of Court 5. His handle was filthy, his jump shot automatic, and his will unbreakable. Coaches came sniffing around like dogs. By 16, he was a national sensation.
ESPN dubbed him the Chosen One 2.0.
But Jaylen never left the streets. He brought them with him. When he was drafted number 1 overall by the Chicago Flames, it was a fairy tale. Overnight, he had millions.
He bought his mama a mansion and his crew a fleet of Bentleys. But while his game ascended, his demons followed.
At first, it was harmless clubbing after games, popping bottles, wild parties. He was young, rich, and untouchable. The league needed stars.
The media adored him. And even when a nightclub brawl ended with a man in a coma, the team's lawyers spun it as self-defense and paid off the witnesses. Jaylen didn't even flinch.
That was the first crack. By year 4, he had a scoring title, MVP award, and 2 championships.
He was compared to Kobe and LeBron.
But under the surface, he was spiraling. He had a crew, the Wolves' childhood friends who lived off his fame. One of them, Trey, became his unofficial manager.
Another, Rico, handled his business.
What that business was, no one dared ask. Jaylen was focused on buckets, the rest didn't matter. But trouble brewed in the shadows. Rico was moving weight, serious weight. Guns, drugs, off-books betting rings.
And Jaylen?
His name was on everything. Not because he approved it, but because he trusted the wrong people. They used his fame to shield their game.
And then came the tipping point.
It was after a playoff loss. Jaylen was pissed. He went to a private club to blow off steam.
Drinks flowed. A poker game turned ugly. A man accused Jaylen of cheating.
Words were exchanged.
A gun appeared.
Shots were fired. No one died, but blood spilled.
The NBA fined him. Sponsors dropped him. But again, the lawyers cleaned it up. A slap on the wrist.
Still, whispers began: Jaylen's not just wild, he's dangerous. Around that time, he met Amara, a journalist who didn't care about his fame.
She saw through the facade and into his broken soul. For a moment, it seemed like she saved him.
He calmed down, trained harder, stayed home more.
He even proposed. But the Wolves didn't like it. They were bleeding money. Without Jaylen's lifestyle funding their empire, their kingdom collapsed.
Trey warned him, "You're slipping, bro, fame needs heat."
You going soft? Jaylen ignored them. He focused on rebuilding himself. Until one morning, everything shattered. A federal raid. Sirens. Helicopters. Rico was arrested in a drug bust. And in Rico's safe?
Contracts, bank transfers, video footage all pointing back to Jaylen. Not because he ran the operation, but because his name and bank accounts were used to move dirty money.
The media went nuclear, MVP or mob boss? The NBA suspended him indefinitely.
His wedding was cancelled. His mother stopped answering his calls. Still, he believed he could beat the case. He was innocent, technically.
But the law doesn't care about technicalities. They care about evidence. And the FBI had a mountain of it. But the worst betrayal came from within.
Trey, the brother he grew up with, flipped. Testified in court to save himself.
Claimed Jaylen knew everything. Showed texts. Voice recordings.
One of them, taken in a Vegas hotel, had Jaylen drunkenly laughing, "We own the feds, baby.
They won't touch us." That recording was the nail in the coffin.
As the trial neared, Jaylen's fortune was gone, burned in legal fees and lost deals.
His image? Shattered.
The media tore him apart.
Fans turned their backs. And Jaylen?
He was a ghost. He pleaded guilty in a last-minute deal to avoid a lifetime sentence. 10 years. That's what the judge gave him.
As the chapter closes, we find Jaylen sitting in a prison cell. No cameras. No fans. Just silence.
He stares at the cracked wall, a photo of Amara and his daughter in his hand. A tear slips down his cheek. In his voice, we hear a whisper. "They gave me the world, and I burned it to the ground."
But his story isn't over yet. The fall was brutal. But the comeback? That might be his greatest play yet.
The prison gates clang shut behind him with the kind of finality that made your soul shudder. Jaylen Cross, once the face of the NBA, now wore a brown inmate jumpsuit and an ID number instead of his iconic number 7 jersey. The crowd's chants had been replaced by silence.
No fans. No cameras. Just cement, steel, and regret.
His first night inside was the hardest. The cell was freezing.
The mattress was thinner than a sheet of paper.
The air smelled of bleach and despair. A towering inmate named Tank eyed him like fresh meat.
"You that baller?" he asked with a half-smile. Jaylen nodded, cautiously. Tank just laughed and walked away. That night, Jaylen didn't sleep. He didn't cry either. He just stared. At the ceiling. At the nothingness.
But days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months.
The media forgot.
The NBA moved on.
New stars rose. Jaylen became a trivia question. A cautionary tale.
Still, something inside him refused to die. At first, he kept to himself. He read books.
Worked out in the yard. Wrote letters to Amara, though she never replied.
He missed his daughter's 3rd birthday.
That one cut deep.
He stared at her photo for hours. Then one day, a scuffle broke out in the cafeteria. A younger inmate got jumped 2 against 1.
Instinct kicked in.
Jaylen rushed in, throwing fists, dragging the kid out.
He ended up in solitary for 2 weeks. But that moment changed everything. The kid's name was Malik. 17. In for armed robbery. A basketball fan. He recognized Jaylen instantly.
"You were the reason I picked up a ball, man," he whispered through a busted lip. That night, Jaylen couldn't sleep again, but this time, not because of pain, because of purpose.
From that moment, he began coaching inmates in the yard. Set up a league.
Started training guys.
Drills. Conditioning. Teamwork.
They called it the Yard League. It became the talk of the prison.
Inmates from rival gangs played together. Guards noticed. The violence dipped. Fights dropped.
Something rare was blooming, hope.
But Jaylen wasn't done.
He applied for an online college program through the prison.
Studied criminal psychology. Wrote articles for prison newsletters. One even got picked up by the Players' Tribune.
It was titled, "I Had It All, Then I Lost Myself."
The internet exploded. Fans who once abandoned him returned.
Some called it redemption. Others called it PR.
But Jaylen didn't care. He wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing peace.
3 years into his sentence, something unexpected happened.
Amara visited. She looked older. Tired.
But her eyes still held that fire. "I hated you for what you became," she said.
"But our daughter, she keeps asking why her daddy disappeared." Jaylen broke.
Not with tears, but with apologies.
Real ones. Amara handed him a drawing.
Crayon scribbles of him holding a basketball and his daughter holding his hand. "She still believes in you," Amara whispered.
"I don't know if I do."
"But she does." That was the moment Jaylen Cross decided he'd never let her down again.
He got certified as a counselor.
Mentored over 30 inmates. One of them, Malik, was released early and went on to play college ball.
ESPN ran a segment, "From Cell Block to Center Court, the Redemption of a Prison League." And then, a miracle.
A lawyer, an old friend from his rookie days, reached out.
He had found a loophole. Improper handling of evidence in the RICO case.
Combined with Jaylen's community impact, there was a chance for early release.
It took months. Court hearings. Petitions. Testimonials from guards, inmates, even Amara.
Then one rainy afternoon, a judge uttered words that echoed through his bones. "Mr. Cross, this court hereby grants you time served and releases you effective immediately." He stepped out into the world 7 years older, wiser, scarred, but alive.
No cameras. No fanfare.
Just Amara, and their daughter, now 10, holding a faded photo of him in a Flames jersey.
"You look different," his daughter said. "I feel different," he replied. But this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Jaylen didn't return to basketball, not as a player. His knees were shot. But he opened a non-profit, Second Shot. A rehab program for ex-athletes and ex-cons. He toured schools. Gave talks.
Worked with the NBA Players Association to create mentorship pipelines. One night, he was invited to the NBA Finals, not to play, but to speak at halftime.
He stood at center court again, this time in a suit, not a jersey.
A packed arena watched as he spoke not of stats and trophies, but of choices, consequences, and redemption.
"There was a time I thought fame made me invincible. But the truth? It made me blind. I lost everything. But in losing it, I found something greater, myself." The crowd stood and applauded, not because he was an MVP, but because he was a man who had fallen harder than most, and stood back up. Later that night, his daughter hugged him. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." That was his real championship.